Video games are unique in a lot of ways, and I could go through a laundry list of those, but what I was thinking about today was actually the way we use the power of choice in video games. Like in real life, when you make a decision and you eventually come to the conclusion or you're made aware of the outcome of your choices, you can look back on the decisions you made and how they led to this point, whether doing something different might have changed things or whether you could have chosen to do everything opposite to what you did and the outcome would have been the same. And video games are very reflective of that in that way, but there's a unique perspective that I think they offer as well, in a very introspective, even philosophical way. When you make a choice in a video game, it can do something as simple as alter the immediate scenario that you find yourself in, or it could alter the ending of the game, or in the case of, say, a trilogy series like Mass Effect or Dragon Age, it can, in subtle and not so subtle ways, alter the overall narrative of the story, and by effect, make some slight alterations to the conclusion of that series. But there's a unique thing we can do in video games that you can't do in real life. In real life, once you've made your choices, that's it. They're done. They are part of your past. They're concrete. That's not going to change. They affect your present, and they could have far-reaching consequences in your future that you can't even foresee. But in video games, we can do something that you can't do anywhere else. You can go into your files, you can load up an earlier save, you can go back, and you can change the choices that you made. Whether it's because the outcome that you had was less than desirable, or maybe everything went really, really well, and you're just curious and think, okay, you know what? Let's try to do everything opposite to what I did the first time and see if this is either going to change the outcome or nothing's going to be different. And it was all just kind of meaningless, or maybe superfluous would be the right word for it. But either way, that's what I find sort of interesting when I was thinking about it today, because I was looking up the new Telltale Batman game, and it got me thinking about the other games I've enjoyed from them, like The Wolf Among Us or The Walking Dead, and how Game of Thrones too, I almost forgot that. And how with those three games, the choices that you make, it'd be very easy to just brush an entire game like that by saying, no, the choices that you make really don't matter, because in the end, the conclusion's more or less the same with garnish. But I think that still makes the game great. Just because the choices you make don't have a giant global scale, universe-altering effect on how the game concludes doesn't make the choices any less meaningful. Because, yeah, I guess if you want to look at it from a surface, it is basically just decoration, and the only real effects that it has are on those individual characters. The conclusion isn't really going to change much. But that's kind of the interesting part, that you make all of these choices. And if you go back and play those games over because you're like, oh man, how that ended. Maybe if I go back and change just a few things, I can make it a little bit better for this character or all these characters, or I can get back at that guy because he really screwed me over. There's a bunch of different ways you can approach it. And even if at the end the conclusion doesn't really change, I don't think the choices are any less meaningful, because, again, if you want to get philosophical about it, you can apply that to a real world scenario where you could look back on a situation and maybe if you made every single decision so far polar opposite to what you did, the conclusion would be the same. Your choices, in a sense, didn't matter. But I think you have to go a little bit deeper and examine how exactly it affects the characters or the short-term effects on the scenario. They do mean something, and they do have an effect, and maybe the conclusion doesn't change, but in the case of, let's say, a Telltale game, the characters who are around to experience that conclusion, the relationships that have been affected by those choices, how different people now view the overall problem or plot or each other or their role in that world. Those have changed. Those have been altered. drastically in some cases. Maybe in other cases, the effects won't be felt till the next game or the next episode. Who knows? The conclusion hasn't changed, but there is an immediate effect. So while you may feel that your choices were meaningless and that whatever decisions you made have absolutely zero power, no effect on how the game's going to end, they still do mean something. And that's what's so great about going back and changing them, because it's like, okay, you know what? Maybe in the case of The Walking Dead, your relationship with Clementine and Lee was great at the end of the game. And then you decide, you know what? I'm going to go back. I'm going to start at episode 1, and I am not going to talk to anybody. I am going to be mute Lee as much as I can and see how that affects the conclusion of the game. If you can even get to the end of the game doing that, I don't know. I might have to try that. That actually seems kind of funny, because sidetrack here, if you've ever just gone even for an episode without saying a thing with Lee, he has got the creepiest, awkward stare for everybody, and I can totally understand why no one would trust that guy. I mean, if you were in a zombie apocalypse and there was one member of your group who not only didn't speak a word, but had this wide-eyed, freaky blank stare, and he was a convict, yeah, I wouldn't trust him either. He'd probably be the first one off the island. Can you blame me? I wouldn't. But anyway, that's what I find so interesting about choice. And although I use Telltale as a primary example, you could apply that to any number of RPGs or games where you have decisions to make like that, choosing who lives, who dies, who gets what, which side you ally with. Actually, now that I think about it, I think it would be really hilarious if the ending to a game was ultimately affected by a real arbitrary choice. Like at the beginning, there's some person in a market who says, "Hey there, you're new to the town. I'm going to give you a free piece of clothing. You can either choose boots, gloves, or a hat." And if you choose the hat, the world ends at the end of the game, and every other choice you made didn't mean anything. It was the clothing, the articles you chose at the beginning of the game that ultimately determined the fate of the universe. Somebody make that a thing. I think that would be hilarious. But either way, I think this is a really interesting discussion, and I could go at length with it more, but I think I would need another person around to do that with, because I can only soundboard off myself so much before I start running in circles, and I probably did a bit. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you've got any other examples you'd like to share, or maybe you believe completely different to how I view this particular topic, I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments section. If you like the video, please share it around. And of course, until next time, my name's Rye. Take care of yourselves.